Hi guys, my name is Kristen and welcome to the life of a plant and a book addict. So I, in my day-to-day life, am a grad student in a STEM field, and so I've been getting the really big urge to get more creative with things that I like to do, and I really enjoy reading books, and I have a ton of plants. So I decided to make videos about that in hopes that it would be a little bit better than my day-to-day. So I'm going to try and put videos up every Saturday, and I'm going to try and do 4 videos a month. So we'll see how things go and if I can keep up. And there might be more depending on if there's like extra things that I do in the month that I want to share with you guys. So without further ado, my first video is going to be my September TBR list. So I've been reading about 8 books a month, so I just chose 8 books off of my physical TBR to read. And the way I read books, because of how I got started reading books, which I will probably tell you guys my reading journey in my Rate My Bookshelf video that I'm going to be doing in the future, because I've read so many books this year that I didn't rate, so I want to share them with you. But I tend to read a series, and then after I finish the series, I'll go ahead and I'll read like a palate cleanser book that's only like one book in the series. So like I'll read like a romance or a thriller, and that will kind of give me a break before I hop into the next series. And that way I can change up the pace a little bit. And I also usually read a book at my house, and then I usually keep books at my boyfriend's house because I'm over there so often that it's really tedious to keep shuttling books back and forth. So I usually just keep something at his house to read, and then I read stuff at my house. So I'm going to show you the 8 books that I'm going to try and read this month. So first up is Eldest by Christopher Palin, I want to say. And this is the second book to Aragon, which, if you haven't read Aragon, it's about a small town boy. He lives in like, I guess you'd want to say like almost a medieval village. It's a fantasy series, if you couldn't tell by the dragon on the front. But he ends up finding this stone in kind of the mysterious place that a lot of people don't like to go because it gives him spooky vibes. It's kind of haunted. People go missing there a lot. And he brings it back to his farm and ends up hatching into a dragon. And dragon riders were this glorious group of people that did so much for the continent that he lives on, but they were all killed by the current king because he only wanted to be the only person that was a dragon rider, and can't fight dragons if you don't have a dragon, kind of a deal. So this is the second book in the series. So this book picks up after Aragon has finished the battle in Trojan Helm, and it follows his journey through Duvalden, which is like where the elves live, and they're going to take over his training in magic and swordsmanship. And you also get the point of view of his cousin Rowan has gone back to Caraval and found out that his cousin has fled and that his father was killed by these creatures called the Razak. And so you kind of get the point of view of the story of going through what's new in Aragon's life and how Ronan deals with the invasion to his village. I also plan on reading Brizinger, which is the 3rd book in the series, and Inheritance, which is the last book in the series. So I'll put those up on the screen now, because those are at my boyfriend's house, because I've already finished reading Eldest, and I'm almost done with Brizinger. And let me tell you, these books, they are not small books either. Like, here's what Aragon looked like, which was only like, it was like 500 pages. And then I got the other 3 in because I had already owned this book since high school, and so I finally bought the rest of them. Look at these books next to each other. Like, it is almost double the original book, and Brizinger is bigger than this one, and I think Inheritance is about the same size as Brizinger. So these books don't get smaller as they go on. So they're definitely taking some time. So I plan on reading and finishing that series this month. And then for my palate cleanser book, I plan on reading The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. And this is kind of set in Victorian times, and you are getting the point of view of, just want to make sure, Lena. You get the point of view of Lena, and her sister has just died in London, and she goes to her sister's mentor, who was a seance leader. She was a medium called Vaudeline. So she goes to Paris to train with Vaudeline so that she can figure out what happens to her sister. And while they are in Paris, Vaudeline gets informed that an old friend of hers has died, and they're asking her to come back to London because she fled the year before. And you kind of get the journey of them going on this trip together to figure out what happened to her sister and what happened with this person that got murdered, that nobody else can figure anything out. And the London Seance Society is the group in London who, they do like mediumship, they do spiritual things for people who have passed, and it's kind of like the trendy thing in this society for this tale. And you kind of get the journey of figuring out what happened to her sister and what happened to this other man, because they're all connected in the end, and you get to see how things turn out with that. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I also have The Lost Apothecary by her, and the way I pick books is usually I look at the cover and then I read the caption and I see if I like it, and most of my reading style tends to be fantasy, thriller, ghost stuff. Like, definitely I only read fiction usually, and it's definitely more of like the fantasy thriller vibes. I actually did read a romance this year, because like fantasy usually has romance, but it was like just pure romance, and I actually really liked it, so I'm incorporating more. It was Beach Read by Emily Henry, which, gorgeous book, absolutely loved it, like devoured it. So that'll be in my bookshelf. My other palette cleanser that I want to look at, and the reason why I'm calling it a palette cleanser is because a lot of the new series that I am starting, I only buy the first book because I don't want to buy the whole series and then read the first book and I'm like, oh, I actually hate this. You know, books aren't cheap, even when I buy books, because I usually buy books off of Target and thrift books, and usually I look at like Facebook, the buy, sell, and trade marketplace, and usually people are selling books semi-cheap on there. So that's usually where I get my books, so, but it still ain't cheap, you know? So this is Rhapsodic, or Rhapsodic? Rhapsodic. I don't think there's an L in there, but I put one there. And as you can see, I've already started this one. I'm about 122 pages in. And this is about Callie. And Callie has all of these IOUs to this person called the Bargainer. And basically, he's like kind of a bad guy. Like, he'll do whatever you want, but you're going to have to owe him. And for Callie, he's never actually asked for repayment. So finally, like, after all these years being separated, like, I think the last time she saw him was like 7 years prior, he finally comes back and he starts asking for payment. And he's like, you gotta pay me back because you owe me all this stuff. And so it goes through kind of like their story about what's gonna happen, what's not gonna happen. And I know that this is part of a series. It has 3 other books in it, and I'm hooked. They're already on my to be bought list because I have a to be bought list and a TBR list, and it jumped ship to my to be bought list to the very top. Also, I really like this cover because it's kind of like that soft touch material, so I like that. Also, I like paperback books. Even though I own a lot of hardcover books, I prefer paperback. What do you guys prefer? I just think it's easier to read. A lot of my paperbacks also get really bent up, but like a majority of the time I'm taking books with me on vacation too, when I fly or when I drive places, so it's a lot easier to carry around paperbacks than it is hardcovers. But I digress. So she's a siren, he's part of the Fae, and it just kind of goes through the journey of him getting back his payments. So I could have told you I was super excited to read this book, but now that I'm in this book, I'm actually really excited as well too. So another palette cleanser for me is The Graveyard book by Neil Gaiman. So this was actually a YouTube recommendation. I cannot remember the YouTuber. Like, I can see her face. She always has on kind of like a trendy black bolero hat that you would kind of it's not a bolero hat, I don't think, but it's like wide brim, something you would see like John Mayer in. But I will link her in the description because I've watched quite a few of her videos. So I will link her in the description, but I got this book recommendation from her, and it's about Nobody Owens, who is known as Bod, and when he's a baby, his family gets killed, and he escapes to the graveyard, and his parents ask the graveyard to take care of him, or the ghost in the graveyard to take care of him. So he becomes part of the graveyard, and it kind of goes through him growing up and figuring out all the things that are going on in the graveyard and how to survive in the graveyard. And then they're worried because if he leaves, they're worried that the man who killed his family is going to come after them. So it kind of just goes through his journey of growing up in the graveyard. So I'm excited to read this one. Well, of course I'm excited to read all of these. That's why I bought them. But my last two books that I'm going to read are from the Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series, because I read The Alchemist in August, which I am going to do an August wrap-up. I wanted to get a video out first, and I thought that since I'm already halfway through September, I should get out my TBR list first before I did an August wrap-up. But I am going to talk about it in my August wrap-up. So the second book is called The Sorceress, and in this book you get Sophie and Josh are twins, and they worked across from each other. They just moved to town. They're military brats, so they're kind of always traveling. Well, they're not military brats. I think of them as military brats because they're always traveling around, but I actually think their parents are archaeologists, and so they're out on a dig. They leave their kids where they're going to be staying for the next couple months, and they get jobs across from each other. And this strange dude comes into town, comes to the bookstore, like magic things start happening. His sister and him flee the city with a Nicholas Flamel, which kind of Harry Potter-esque. And so they go on a journey of like, they're these twins from the prophecy, and they have to get trained in all of these other areas of magic. So I lied. The Magician is the second book, and The Sorceress is the third book. I was reading the back, and I was like, it says this is the third book, and I thought it was the second. Clearly I didn't pay enough attention when I was looking at my books. Anywho, so you get the point of Josh and Sophie have now gone on to the next person to train them in magic, and I believe John Dee, who's the bad guy, he's the bad sorcerer working for the elders, who are like the gods of old, which they have a couple Egyptian goddess and gods that they mention in the first book, so that'll probably follow them throughout this book. But it's like it crosses all types of religions, mythologies, so it's actually really interesting, and that's why I wanted to read it in the first place, because I really like Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology, and they mentioned Egyptian gods for the first book, and I was like, oh, I gotta read it. Now, they were in the hands of Dr. John Dee, and the Dark Elders had the Book of Abraham the Mage, could mean the destruction of the world as we know it. The most powerful book of all time, it holds the secret of eternal life, and a secret more dangerous than any one man should ever possess. And Dee is 2 pages away from the knowledge that would bring the Dark Elders into ultimate power. His only obstacle, Josh and Sophie Newman, who are 8,000 miles away. Because at the end of the first book, they go through a mirror because it's on top of the ley lines, which are like the magic lines, so you can travel back and forth. And they end up in Paris. So after fleeing, Nicholas, Sophie, Josh, and Scatty emerge in Paris, the city of light, home to Nicholas Flamel. Only this homecoming is anything but sweet. Niccolo Machiavelli, immortal author and celebrated art collector, lives in Paris and is working for Dee. He's in hot pursuit, and time is running out for Nicholas and Purnell. Every day they spend without the book, they age 1 year. Their magic becomes weaker and their bodies more frail. For Flamel, the prophecy is clearer and clearer. It's time for Sophie to learn the second elemental magic, fire magic, and there's only one man who can teach it to her. Flamel's old student, the Comte de Saint-Germain, alchemist, magician, and rock star. So in this book, she's going to be learning the second elemental magic because she's already learned wind. And then you go to the sorceress, which is the third book. And in here, she's going to learn about the sorceress and the true sword of Excalibur. And they're going to learn about water magic, because in this series you have wind, earth, fire, and water, and then you have the fifth element, which is, I think they kind of combine it into like sorcery and like necromancy, but I think like normally it would be called spirit. So this goes through teaching her water elemental magic, and I'm looking forward to see what comes out of it. To be honest, I wasn't too impressed with the first book that I read. It was fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It was just fine. But I wanted to see where they took the series, and I wanted to see where it went, especially since they were including like Egyptian gods, and they were including like other types of mythology and fables. I just wanted to see where it went, so I did end up picking up all of the books, which you will see in my September book haul video that I'm also going to film at some point in the near future. So that is my TBR for the month, and I'm super excited. We'll see if I get through all of these, / if I get through all of them and I end up reading some more stuff that's on my TBR still, but I will let you guys know what I thought of these books in my September wrap-up. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time.